Aromatic adventure.
Yeah. You know that very specific time of the summer when things start to calm down? The temperature drops, the wind picks up a little bit, and you can even swear that you could smell autumn creeping up around the corner. That's right, you can smell fall getting closer and closer. Well, that happened to me today. That's right, I could smell the fall getting closer to me. But it didn't come from this direction, it didn't come from that direction. Weirdly enough, it came from a box. A box right here by my feet, and I'll explain in just a second. Welcome everybody to the Candle Enthusiast. I am your host, Shane Carlson, and I come to you today with 3 very special autumnal candles, once again by HomeWorx Candles by Harry Slatkin. The fine folks at HomeWorx sent me this box, and inside this box is their brand new 2018 fall collection, all through the house. That's right. And if you haven't seen my 2018 HomeWorx holiday video, I'm gonna link up that video in the description below. I had a blast making that video, but today we're not talking about Santa Claus, we're not talking about mistletoe. We're gonna be talking about some crisp autumn air. It's coming from this box. It's permeating through this box. So I want to take out these candles, give you a nice up-close look, and do some good old-fashioned sensory evaluation. Or in other words, smell these candles and share my thoughts. But before we begin, it's important that I mention that this is a non-sponsored video. I'm not being paid to share any of my opinions or say anything specific. HomeWorx sent me this box and kindly asked me if I could share my opinions, and that's precisely what I'm gonna do. So let's get to it. Let's not waste any more time. This is what it's gonna look like when you receive your candles in the mail. We have this piece of styrofoam, and if we pull this out, oh yeah, that never gets old. Inside of this box, we have 3 very shiny candles peering through. There's a lot of brilliance, luster, shininess from this box. I hate to get my fingerprints on it, but we have to dive in deep. This time, we're not dealing with chrome lids. We have a gold color. First candle on the list is going to be Harvest Leaves. And just like the holiday collection, we have this lattice work pattern all the way around the label, this cross-hatching. And if we open this up, I'm gonna smell these in just a second, but I do wanna show you what is inside. Count them, 4 wicks. The wax comes in this really thick, heavy glass, ornate, what I call a piece of furniture. 5 inches in diameter here, 5 inches. So we're gonna get some massive aromatic experiences once this candle is lit. But let's move through and introduce all of the candles. This was Harvest Leaves. Let's put that one right there. Second candle, we have Autumn Pinecone. This time we have a deeper brown, rustic color. A color of a nice leather sofa, perhaps. Wow. And the third candle, probably the most talked about from the collection, Pumpkin Caramel Corn. So let's line these up. But now it's time to really focus in. Look at each candle one at a time. Let's put these 2 off to the side, and let's focus on the first candle, which is going to be Harvest Leaves. Let's crack this open and see what we have, but let's remove these little pieces first. Here we go. So the first thing that I have to discuss about this candle are the robust wooden notes. On my holiday video for HomeWorx, I talked about softwood like spruce, pine, balsam fir. But this is a hardwood experience. Think about oak, think about cherry, think about maple. This is hardwood. And something I also said, oak has something that winemakers refer to as barrel spice, meaning when you age a beverage inside of a brand new oak barrel, it imparts its flavor into that beverage. And the reason why they say barrel spice is because sometimes it actually smells and tastes like, baking spices that we're very familiar with. And there is spice inside of this candle. But what's significant about the spice in this candle is that we have the underdog of the spice rack headlining the show. I'm referring to nutmeg. There's other baking spices, and I'll address them in a little bit, but let's talk about nutmeg for a second. In conversation, cinnamon and nutmeg can easily be mixed up, interchangeable, confused, but if you really know your nutmeg, you'll know that it has some nuances that really come to play so far in this candle. And I'm not talking about the pre-ground stuff that you buy at the grocery store. I'm talking about the freshly ground nutmeg. So if I smell this, there is a nuance. Trust me, I think you would agree with me that there is this lacquered wood, this freshly made, handcrafted piece of wooden furniture. That's what this smells like. It smells like I just walked into like a woodsman craft shop and he's like whittling a chair. So with the spice of the nutmeg and that nuance of that luxurious wooden furniture, it's starting to paint an image in my head of the hardwood tree. And when it comes to harvest leaves, when the harvest leaves are raining from the sky, what other tree can you possibly think about other than the maple tree? I like that. So let's run with this maple idea, concept for a moment. There's also a nuttiness here, and it could be classified in many ways. For me, when I smell this, because of this candle's sweetness, I'm thinking of pralines. Think of that pecan, hazelnut, almond concoction with the cream and the sugar that creates that fudgy treat. Very sweet. But also the nuttiness is conjuring the visuals of acorns, right? You have those sporadically placed acorns all along the multicolored maple leaves on the forest floor. Really, this is really starting to paint a portrait. It's developing very fast. But everything I mentioned so far relates to the outdoors. So let's go inside for a moment, shall we? Let's talk about the indoor aromatics. Specifically, apple. When I smell this, there's a lot of associations I have with this candle and apples. Apple slices, baked apples. There are other baking spices here. The other spices that we find in apple pie spice. So not just the nutmeg, but the cinnamon, the clove, the allspice. Even a little bit of this orange peel. So with the sweetness, the fruitiness, and that spiciness that we have, this creates the warmth of something that we would experience when we taste or smell apple butter. So the deliciousness factor is happening as well. We have the outdoors, we have the indoors, the kitchen. But this is where things really get interesting. You take the outdoors and the indoors, and you have this autumnal collision. And suddenly, a whole new image in my mind starts to develop. We talked about the oak-aged beverage. We talked about the spice, the fruitiness, the nuttiness. We talked about the leaves, the wood, right? So, in my mind, this is creating, you're probably going to think, I'm going to say hot apple cider. But no. Calvados, or apple brandy. And furthermore, if you've ever had apple brandy liqueur, it has things like honey and Madagascar, vanilla, things that I find in this candle. There is that vanilla, there is that amber. You get that citrus peel to add a little bit more of that spice that's also in those liqueurs. This is an authentic autumn aromatic journey. It's true to life, it's nostalgic, and even though it's rustic, it's dressed up in luxury. I can't help but be reminded when I smell this, running through the apple orchards in the forests when I was a kid during the autumn season. But it's also reminding me of that perfectly balanced, fruity, spicy, autumnal cocktail. Excellent execution, in my own humble opinion. Harvest leaves. So we have a spiced pumpkin, mandarin, cranberry, fir balsam, and applewood. What's really interesting, and I like this, is how different my perception was of this candle compared to the fragrance notes here. I think this is probably the biggest discrepancy that I've seen between my aromatic experience smelling a HomeWorx candle and the fragrance notes. I could talk about that one all day, but for the sake of time, let us continue to candle number 2. Autumn Pinecone. Of course, you have to have pine cones in autumn. Completely different experience right from the beginning. Really bright citrus lime-like aromas. That citrusy pine, the pine tree, the balsam fir that we talked about in some of the holiday candles. That sweet sap, and even the sap that we find, that really concentrated white sap on pine cones. And what's inside of those pine cones? You guessed it, juniper berries. So we're really starting to bridge now a lot of those aromas that we saw in the holiday collection, bridging to this autumn collection, or at least an autumn pine cone, which is really cool. Juniper berry has that bright, fruity, citrusy aroma profile, and it makes me think that I could take this into another beverage direction. Talk about how citrus and juniper berries are used in the distillation process of a lot of gins, and how some higher quality gins actually do taste a little bit like Christmas trees sometimes. But we talked enough about booze today, so I'll drive this in a different direction. Let's talk about the autumn leaves. I mean, of course, autumn pine cone, you gotta have autumn leaves. You have an autumn candle, you gotta have crushed, decaying foliage, right? But is it just me, or do a lot of candle companies portray autumn leaves, not all the time, but sometimes, in a cologne-like fashion? You get a lot of those herbal notes, you have a lot of those citrus notes and floral notes mixed together, some exotic notes in there that give it this cologne-like smell, like something you would spray on yourself after a shower or before you go out for the evening. That's not what this is. This is not cologne-like. This is authentically like a big pile of leaves in your front yard, wet leaves. There's dew on these leaves. There's moisture on these leaves. And if that sounds in any way like it would be a bad thing, it's not. Trust me. And herbaceousness for days. We have to really address this. Fresh picked spearmint leaves. Yes, there's that mintiness, but there's also like blue spruce needles. We have camphor. We have eucalyptus. And there is a mentholated quality to this candle, and this is not an understatement. What do all of those herbs have in common? They have a significant cooling sensation. When you smell this, there's a cooling feeling happening through your sinuses. And what's great about this is that when you burn this candle in the warmth of your own living room, you're going to be bringing a little bit of that crisp autumn air inside. It's going to create that illusion of that cold, frigid air inside your living room while you're warm and toasty sitting down watching television. I mean, really, to be perfectly honest, this smells like that autumn evening. You're outside in the yard and you're raking up all of the leaves and the pine cones and the pine needles. That sun is making its inevitable decline, so it keeps getting colder and colder. And as you're raking everything together, you're brushing up all of those aromatics from underneath your feet, and you're smelling that autumn forest floor. Do they still make those trash bags with the jack-o'-lanterns on them? You know what I mean, the big orange bags with the jack-o'-lantern. I gotta get some of those this year. I don't know if they still make them, but I need them. And here's a weird note, but I can't say that I'm surprised. Medium roasted coffee beans. Okay, now hear me out. A medium roasted coffee bean, or sometimes it's known as a city roast. A medium roasted coffee bean retains a lot of the nuttiness, the fruitiness of the actual bean. It's not roasted to the point where it starts to develop the fudgy, chocolate, smoky notes. So if you've ever had an excellent cup of Guatemalan, Honduras, or Costa Rican coffee before, I think you'll be pleasantly reminded of that really well brewed, slightly toasted, medium roasted coffee bean. And if you're not familiar with Costa Rican coffees, if that's not your thing, I think we can all relate to the experience of walking into a cafe or a coffee shop during the autumn months and just smelling the fresh smell, not of the brewed coffee, but of the roasted coffee. And you know what? It totally works. While I'm raking up the leaves, the pine cones, the pine needles, stacking them up in big piles, I got a cup of Joe in my hand and I'm sipping on it. And so it works thematically, conceptually, and aromatically it really works because those coffee bean notes contrast a lot of those citrusy, fruitier, brighter notes that we talked about earlier. And this last note that I want to share is very outside the box, but I think it's seasonally accurate, so I want to express it. If you ever spent time in apple country during the harvest season and you're driving around to different farmers markets, you're going to find a whole selection of many different varieties of apples. Macintosh, Cortland, Gala, Fuji, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, you name it. There's going to be tons of apples to choose from. However, you'll also probably find some stone fruit, peaches, apricots, nectarines. Yeah, they are going to be harvested in cooler areas in the months of August and September, and you'll probably find them at those markets. And weirdly, a weird twist, I am smelling a very tart, very bright, peachy nectarine, apricot, if you want to go there, aromatic on this candle. I'm smelling apple. I'm smelling that malic acid, that tart apple that we get at those farmers markets. But I think not mentioning that stone fruit, I think I'd be leaving something important out by not mentioning it. Autumn pinecone, completely different than the harvest leaves. Let me read the fragrance notes. Fallen pine cones, red oak, fresh eucalyptus, and juniper berry. Very nice. So my interpretation, a little bit closer to the fragrance notes than the harvest leaves. So let's put them side by side. And the third, but certainly not the least candle, the candle that, from my experience, the most talked about of this collection and the holiday collection combined. Listen to the name of this fragrance. Pumpkin caramel corn. That's it. I mean, that's all you have to do. If you ever want to stop me dead in my tracks, just leave me speechless and confused. If you see me walking down the street, just utter those three words. Pumpkin caramel corn. I'll stop and I'll be looking for some pumpkin caramel corn. Those three nouns together, there's so much goodness. So I understand the hype surrounding this candle, but we have to smell it. Are we ready? Let us do it. Pumpkin caramel corn. Man. Just, it's so savory, but I have to completely admit, I really thought I knew exactly what this candle was going to smell like. Before I ever smelled it, I already had my notes I wanted to share with you, what I was going to say about it. But after I smelled it, it really did throw me off guard. Where do we begin? Caramel, I think, is probably a good start. Do I smell caramel? Well, saying caramel as a descriptor on this candle, I really do believe that's a disservice to this fragrance, because what we really should be talking about is butterscotch or toffee, really. Do we know the difference between caramel, butterscotch, and toffee? Well, think about that for a second. While you're thinking about it, what I'm gonna do is, I figured while we're evaluating a popcorn themed candle, we had to, if this works, it does work, make some popcorn. So I have some canola oil. I'm gonna dump that. Oh yeah. Now this is essentially a hot plate with this spinning mechanism, and we need some of this. Popcorn kernels. I have a half cup here. And this has a top. So I'm gonna let this do its thing while we're talking about this candle. And by the time we're done, maybe we'll have some fresh popcorn, and then we can smell the popcorn and have a frame of reference to the candle that we're evaluating. But I am gonna put this over here. Caramel, butterscotch, and toffee. What's happening here? Caramel is going to be the caramelization process of cane sugar. So you add heat, you add butter. If you're making a sauce, you can add vanilla extract and cream and salt, all the goodness that you want. But butterscotch is going to utilize brown sugar. Brown sugar has molasses in addition to just the sugar. And if you're familiar with brown sugar, you have light brown sugar and dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar can have almost 3 times the amount of molasses included. And that is something I want to express here. There is a dark brown sugar. So when you're making butterscotch, you have that butter, you have that sugar, you're caramelizing. It's a non-enzymatic browning. You get that bubbly goodness. And if you want to make toffee, all you got to do is keep that caramelization process going for a little bit longer. Caramelize it a little bit more so you get more of the darker, deeper, richer notes. So to me, this is a caramel popcorn, yes, but more of that butterscotch, toffee aroma. And for safe measure, let's add a little bit of extra sauce, right, to that popcorn and let it solidify. And let's make this monstrous caramel popcorn ball. And if you ask me, there really isn't anything much better than the caramel popcorn ball for a Halloween treat. So this is pulling at my heartstrings a little bit. And speaking of corn, let's talk about the corniness. Let's try to be as specific as we can, because this is not movie theater buttered popcorn. This is legit county fair, Disneyland-esque kettle corn. There's that concentrated corn kernel aroma. And something else I want to throw in there, grilled corn on the cob, where you're actually caramelizing the sugars inside of the kernel. And this next topic really tripped me up. I was fully expecting for this pumpkin caramel corn to be doused with pumpkin spice. Now, I say this all the time, but let me just be perfectly clear. Pumpkin spice is not pumpkin. Pumpkin spice is short for pumpkin pie spice, or in other words, the spices that we use in pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie spice traditionally has 3 ingredients. We have cinnamon, we have nutmeg, and we have ginger. That's it. If I take all 3 and I add them together, mix this just like that, bam! Whoa! It's like magic. It's like mixology. It is mixology of baking spices. And I can sprinkle this on anything I want. I can drop this in hot cocoa. I can drop this in my latte. I can drop this in on pastries. I can do anything with this. Here's the thing. This doesn't smell like pumpkin pie. This doesn't smell like a Starbucks pumpkin spiced latte. This doesn't smell like the array of pumpkin spice products that they sell at Trader Joe's during the months of autumn. There's really not a lot of spices in here. And in fact, if, pumpkin wasn't in the title, I don't think I'd be bringing up spices at all in my evaluation, to be perfectly honest. Just like the label states, I smell pumpkin, but I don't smell pumpkin spice. But I know this is going to stir up a lot of conversation, because if you look at the bottom of this jar, one of the 3 fragrance notes clearly says pumpkin spice. But I'm wondering if maybe this should say spiced pumpkin. You see the difference? In fact, if we go back to Harvest Leaves, we see spiced pumpkin as a fragrance note on that candle. So in my humble opinion, an opinion coming from someone who really knows their baking spices, to me, this is a hot sheet pan, big brown sugar sweetness, salt, butter, wedges of pumpkin or squash, pumpkin squash, but with just a tiny dash of spice, if any at all. This is really, for me, a roasted pumpkin aroma, a sweet roasted squash. And please don't take this as a criticism against this candle or a knock against this candle, because another opinion of mine is that I think this candle works far better than if it had tons of baking spices in it. I mean, really, during the autumn season, I think the last thing we need is another candle with massive baking spices. Maybe we should take a step back and focus more on what we put the baking spices on. And in this case, that's what we're doing. We're smelling the roasted pumpkin, the squash, the caramel corn, or the butterscotch. Maybe we don't need all those baking spices. But if you want to incorporate baking spices into this candle, light this up and whip up a mug of hot spiced apple cider, or a cup or a mug of chai tea, and it's a win-win situation. I was expecting a lot from this candle based on its hype and everybody talking about it, but I can safely say that it has exceeded my expectations, and I mean that wholeheartedly. This is truly something special, and I get it now. I get what everyone who has smelled this candle, has had a chance to smell this candle, is talking about. Very, very savory, salty, buttery, decadent candle that pushes the envelope just about in all of those categories. Pumpkin, caramel corn, a part of the 2018 HomeWorx by Harry Slatkin, all through the house collection. That's a mouthful. Wow. But here's the thing. I have some pumpkin spice all mixed together. I have some popcorn. I hate to see this all go to waste, let's whip together a little autumn treat, shall we? We have our popcorn fully popped. How do you do this? I'm gonna empty it into our bowl. It's still hot. It's still hot. And to pour it towards your face, definitely not the way to go. We have some kosher salt. And then our really gooey caramel concoction. Very dark molasses-like color. And this is the fun yet very dangerous part. I'm gonna do one of these. And because we have it, let's do a little bit of our pumpkin spice. Let's really go at it. And let's give her a taste. Look at that, look at that. Can you see that? Can you see? All right. Well, if that doesn't remind you of Halloween, I don't know what will. In closing, I want to extend a very warm thank you to the fine folks at HomeWorx Candles and Mr. Harry Slatkin for, of course, providing me with these 3 awesome candles. Brand new for 2018, all through the house, available on QVC. So make sure you swing over to the QVC website and check out the availability. Those of you who have pre-ordered, they apparently will be shipped in September. I'm sure everyone who ordered them will enjoy them. And for you folks who are joining the Candle Enthusiast for the first time, thank you for sitting down with me while I evaluated these candles. I had a blast, and I hope that you decide to hit that subscribe button right there in the corner because we have tons of great candle content coming up in the near future. But also, this is a destination-based channel. We go places. So during the months of August, September, October, November, December, we're out on the road visiting attractions, holiday festivities, fairs, old amusement parks. Those of you who have been subscribed for the past few years know exactly what I'm talking about. So I hope that you decide to come along for the ride this season. Tons of fun stuff planned. But for today, that is going to do it. Thank you so much for joining once again, and I will be seeing you folks real soon. Be good, will you?